Imagine waking before the world has learned how to hurry, before alarms, messages, traffic, and deadlines have trained the human body to rise in panic. The first thing that reaches you is not a sound from a machine, but a thin grey light spreading slowly across the entrance of a rock shelter. The air is cold, the fire is low, and somewhere close by, another person shifts under animal skins as the day begins without anyone commanding it to begin. You do not open your eyes into silence, because the ancient world is never truly silent. There is the soft crackle of dying embers, the breathing of people sleeping close together, and beyond the shelter, birds calling into the first pale edge of morning. A child murmurs, someone whispers a few words, and for a moment the whole group seems to hover between sleep and waking. This is not a village, not a house, and not a life arranged by clocks. This is a band of human beings living tens of thousands of years, before cities, before written laws, before money, before the idea that a day should be divided into hours that belong to someone else. You are awake now, but nothing rushes you forward. And that alone makes this world almost impossible for a modern mind to understand. If you have ever imagined prehistoric people as miserable creatures stumbling from one crisis to the next, this morning already begins to challenge that picture. There is danger here, real danger, but there is also warmth, routine, memory, and a strange calm that modern life has mostly forgotten. So what did an ordinary person actually do all day when survival was not an office, not a salary, not a screen, but the direct work of staying alive with other people? The answer is more unsettling than the old image of cavemen running endlessly from predators. These people were not simply surviving in some empty animal state because they were thinking, choosing, remembering, teaching, joking, decorating, grieving, and creating meaning around the fire. They were anatomically like us, emotionally like us, and yet their daily reality was so different that it feels almost like entering another version of humanity. You are living roughly 40,000 years ago, give or take the deep blur of prehistory. Your body is modern, your brain is modern, your capacity for language, fear, love, imagination, and memory is fully human. But the world around you has no farms, no roads, no shops, no permanent walls protecting you from the night. Everything you need must be found, made, carried, shared, repaired, or remembered. This is why the old stereotype breaks so quickly when we look more closely. The familiar picture says these people spent every waking moment starving, hunting, fleeing, and struggling through a brutal life with no room for anything else. But if that were true, how do we explain the art, the beads, the burials, the music, the careful tools, and the signs of care for people who could no longer hunt or gather for themselves? The archaeological record keeps whispering a different story. Early humans had hardship, but they also had leisure. They had fear, but they also had beauty. They had hunger, but they also had feasts, songs, and long evenings in which no urgent task demanded their hands. They were not primitive machines built only to stay alive, because they were already doing the things that make life feel human. This is where the real mystery begins. Not with how they survived, but with how they lived. What filled the hours between waking and sleep for people who had no jobs to commute to, no bills to pay, no supermarkets to visit, and no written history to leave behind? To answer that, we have to slow down and follow the day as they would have lived it, beginning with the cold grey morning and the fire that must not die. The fire is the center before anyone speaks of plans. It has burned through the night, protected by whoever woke in darkness to feed it, and now it sits in the ash like a small surviving sun. If it goes out completely, the group loses more than comfort, because flame means warmth, cooking, protection, light, and the fragile boundary between the human circle and everything waiting beyond it. Someone is already awake near the embers, because in a world like this, sleep is rarely the sealed private thing it has become today. People may sleep in phases, waking for a while in the deep night, speaking softly, checking children, listening to the dark, then drifting back again when the world feels safe enough. At almost any hour, someone may be half-conscious, and that half-consciousness can be the difference between hearing a predator early and hearing it too late. The person by the fire adds a few sticks, and the orange glow strengthens against the stone. Faces appear slowly in the low light, not as strangers, but as the people who are your shelter, as much as the rock itself is your shelter. In this world, the group is not a social preference. It is the structure that keeps death slightly farther away. You feel the cold before you fully move. It is not necessarily the killing cold of deep winter, but the sharp morning chill that makes the warmth of skins and bodies difficult to leave. You have slept close to others, not because every night is tender, but because heat is valuable. And in prehistory, even the warmth of another body is a form of shared technology. The smell of the morning is thick and familiar. Smoke clings to everything, mixed with earth, hide, old fat, human skin, and the mineral dampness of stone. To a modern person it might seem harsh, but to you it is the smell of safety, because it means the fire lived, the group stayed together, and another night has passed without disaster. More people begin to stir as the light grows stronger. Children wake first, as children often do, restless before the adults are ready, already drawn toward movement, curiosity, and the fire. An older voice tells them to stay close for a little longer. But childhood has never been patient. Not now and not 40,000 years ago. The adults rise slowly.
And this is one of the most important things to notice.
There is no sudden leap into obligation, no racing toward a door, no invisible punishment waiting because the morning has started badly. The day is governed by light, hunger, weather, bodies,
and the needs of the group. And none of those things move with the cruelty of a clock. People stretch,
yawn, scratch, and work stiffness out of their joints. They slept on grass, hides, and earth, not on soft modern mattresses, and the body must be persuaded back into motion.
Even this simple act tells you something about the rhythm of the day, because energy is not wasted when calories must be earned from the landscape. Someone steps outside to read the morning.
Not to admire the view, but to ask the ancient questions that decide what can and cannot happen today. Did anything pass near the camp during the night? Is the wind different? Do the clouds carry rain? Are the birds behaving normally? And what is the land saying before anyone begins to move across it? To you, the ground might look like ground. To them, it is a page covered in fresh messages, some obvious, some almost invisible.
A bent stem, a mark in damp soil, the sudden silence of birds.
Or a scent carried on shifting air can reveal danger, food, weather, or the movement of animals before the eye sees anything clearly. This kind of knowledge is not romantic instinct. It is trained attention. A skilled person can tell from tracks how recently an animal passed, whether it moved calmly or in fear, whether it was alone or part of a group, whether it limped, fed, fled, or paused. Imagine living in a world where missing one of those details might mean hunger tonight or blood before sunset. As more people wake, the camp gathers itself back into a single mind. Quiet words begin around the fire, first about small things, then about dreams, weather, hunger, and what someone noticed yesterday before darkness came. Dreams may not be dismissed as private nonsense here, because a vivid dream can feel like warning, memory, message, or contact with something beyond ordinary waking life. The group needs food, but that is not a new problem. It is the permanent background of every day, the question beneath every plan and every movement. The real decision is not whether to search, but where to go, what to trust, who knows the signs, and which risk is worth taking before the light begins to fade again. Someone remembers berry bushes nearly ready in a certain place. Someone else mentions tracks by the river from the previous day, and another suggests checking the fishing spots if the water is low enough.
Nobody needs to stand above the others and issue commands.
Because leadership in a small band often appears through knowledge rather than authority. This is not democracy in the modern sense, and it is not rule by a king. It is something older, looser, and more intimate, where decisions form through conversation, memory, persuasion, and trust in people who have proven they understand a particular problem. In a world without written maps, the best map may be an elder's memory, a hunter's eye, or the quiet confidence of someone who has gathered the same valley since childhood. For now, though, the morning is still soft. The plans have not hardened into movement, the tools have not yet been lifted, and hunger has not yet become urgent enough to pull everyone outward. The group simply exists together for a while, reassembled after the vulnerability of sleep, each person present, breathing, alive, and accounted for. That fact matters more than it might seem. Every morning is a small confirmation that the night did not take anyone, that no child wandered, no predator entered, no sickness worsened suddenly in the dark. Before the day becomes labor, it is first relief. Children are playing now at the edge of the firelight. They chase, tumble, wrestle, copy gestures they have seen adults make, and test how far they can go before someone calls them back. To modern eyes, it may look like ordinary play, but inside it they are rehearsing balance, strength, courage, negotiation, and the first rough grammar of social life. Adults watch without watching fully. A mother repairs something with her hands while tracking her child with the corner of her eye, and an older man adjusts a tool while listening to 3 conversations at once. In a small group, attention is shared like food, spread thinly but constantly across children, fire, tools, weather, and one another. Practical work begins almost without announcement. A spear point is checked, a cord is inspected, a hide is moved closer to warmth, and someone tests the edge of a stone flake against a thumb. These are not chores waiting on a list. They are the ordinary maintenance of a life where a loose binding, a dull scraper, or a failed basket can become a serious problem later. Still, there is no sense of panic. The sun is climbing, the cold is loosening, and the camp is slowly turning from sleep into movement. You may have been awake for an hour, though there is no number for it and no reason to measure it. Your stomach begins to remind you that the body has been fasting through the night. Others feel it too, and soon the attention of the camp will bend toward food, not as a scheduled meal, but as an opportunity shaped by what remains, what can be cooked, and what must be found. But before that happens, pause for a moment in this opening of the day, because it reveals something civilization has almost erased. There is no violent jump from sleep into performance. There is no demand to become useful before your mind has fully returned to your body. There is only the slow human passage from darkness to light, from warmth to movement, from the private world of dreams back into the shared world of fire, voices, and need. And maybe that is why this ancient morning feels strangely familiar despite everything that separates it from us. The desire to wake slowly, to stay warm, to be near others before facing the day is not weakness or laziness. It may be a memory older than cities, older than agriculture, older than every alarm that has ever dragged a human being out of sleep before the body was ready. This is the beginning of an ordinary day in the Paleolithic. No dramatic mammoth hunt yet, no sacred cave, no painted animal glowing in torchlight, no great crisis forcing the group into legend. Just grey dawn, shared warmth, low voices, the fragile survival of fire, and the first question rising with hunger. What will the day give, and what will it demand in return? The first food of the day is not breakfast in the way a modern person understands it. There is no fixed hour, no table waiting, no neat division between morning meal and the rest of life. You eat because the body asks, because something remains from yesterday. or because the fire has made one hard thing soft enough to become food. Near the warmth, someone unwraps a piece of meat kept from an earlier kill. It has been protected from direct heat and light, but it carries the strong smell of something that cannot be ignored for much longer. You tear away a strip, chew slowly, and feel how much work the jaw must do before the body can claim what it needs. This is food without softness, convenience, or disguise. Every bite reminds you that eating is not passive here, because teeth, hands, fire, and patience all have to participate. Modern meals often arrive already transformed, but in this world, the transformation is still visible in every torn fiber and every darkened edge. Beside the meat, there are gathered foods that tell a quieter story. Nuts sit in a simple container, berries dried from an earlier season lie dark and wrinkled, and a few roots rest close to the heat, where they have been slowly changing through the night. If the hunt is the image we remember, why is so much of this morning built from things that never ran away? That question opens the first major misunderstanding about prehistoric life. Meat mattered deeply, especially when it came rich with fat, marrow, and organs, but it was never the whole story of the human diet. The people around this fire survived because they knew how to eat almost everything the land could safely offer. Someone cracks a nut with practiced pressure, not smashing it blindly, but breaking the shell just enough to free the inside. A child watches closely, trying to copy the angle, failing once, then trying again with the seriousness of someone learning something far bigger than a snack. In this world, even a small movement of the hand can carry knowledge passed down through generations. The berries are easier, and their sweetness arrives quickly. They are not fresh anymore, but drying has made them last beyond the brief abundance of the season that produced them. A handful gives fast energy, and for a moment the taste of a warmer time returns in the cold of the morning. The roots are different, because they would have punished anyone impatient enough to eat them raw. Fire has done its slow hidden work, breaking what was tough, dulling what was harmful, and turning a dangerous plant into something useful. How many forgotten experiments, mistakes, illnesses, and narrow escapes were needed before people learned that heat could change the rules of survival? You pull one root from the edge of the ash and wait until it can be touched. The outside comes away roughly, and inside it is soft enough to bite, not delicious by modern standards, but heavy, warm, and safe. That safety is the miracle, because the fire has not merely cooked food, it has expanded the world of what food can be. This is one of the quiet revolutions of human life. Once fire became part of the meal, plants that were useless or harmful could become dependable, and seeds, roots, and tough fibers could release energy that the body could not easily take on its own. The human day was not shaped only by spears and animals, but by this patient alliance between heat and knowledge. Evidence for this diet does not come from imagination alone. Scientists have found traces in ancient teeth, hardened plaque, microscopic starches, plant residues, and even fossilized waste that preserves the strange intimacy of what bodies once consumed. Those remains show a menu far wider than the old image of meat-hungry hunters allows. There are signs of roots, seeds, nuts, fruits, wild grains, and plants that required careful processing before they could be eaten. There is also evidence that insects may have been part of the diet, not as desperation, but as concentrated sources of fat and protein. To a modern viewer, that might feel surprising, but the ancient body cared less about disgust than about energy. What emerges is not a picture of narrow survival, but of astonishing flexibility. People learned the edible possibilities of their surroundings with an accuracy that modern life rarely demands from anyone. They knew which part of a plant to take, when to take it, how to prepare it, and what danger hid behind a similar leaf or smell. Around the fire, the morning meal is not private. People take, share, offer, chew, talk, and keep their hands busy as the first decisions of the day begin to form. Nobody disappears into a separate room with their own portion, because food here is never just nutrition. It is relationship. A young mother breaks small pieces for a child who is still learning how to manage hard textures. An older woman prepares a mixture of dried meat and fat, working it into something dense enough to travel and last. What looks simple from the outside is actually technical knowledge, because the wrong balance can spoil, crumble, or fail when it is needed most. The person who brought meat yesterday is not automatically the person who eats best today. In many foraging groups, the kill is shared widely because one successful hunter this week may depend on another person's luck next week. The meal becomes insurance, and generosity becomes a survival strategy disguised as ordinary behavior. Children drift between adults, asking, reaching, receiving small bites, and being gently corrected when they take too much. They are not outside the system. They are learning the system through every hand that feeds them and every boundary that stops them. How does a child learn fairness before anyone writes a law, if not by watching who shares and who is remembered for refusing? No one calls this education, but education is everywhere. The child who learns how to crack a nut is also learning patience. The child who watches roots being roasted is learning danger. And the child who hears adults discuss yesterday's signs is learning how memory becomes tomorrow's food. The camp is a school without walls, and hunger is one of its teachers. As people eat, the conversation begins to turn outward. Someone mentions a place where nuts may be ready, another remembers a patch of roots near water, and someone else thinks certain berries might have reached their brief moment of sweetness. These are not casual observations, because in a world without stored abundance, timing can decide whether a walk ends with full baskets or empty hands. Hands continue moving while the group talks. A stone edge slices meat into thinner strips. Someone sorts a small pile of herbs, and another person checks whether anything kept from previous days has begun to mold. The morning is not divided between planning and labor, because here thought and work flow through the same gestures. The knowledge required for these small acts is immense. A skilled gatherer may recognize hundreds of plants, not only by their mature shape, but by season, location, smell, texture, and the dangerous lookalikes growing nearby. One wrong choice can mean sickness, and one remembered detail can feed an entire group. This is why the idea of primitive ignorance collapses so quickly. These people may not have written names for species in books, but their memory held living maps of food, medicine, poison, fiber, fuel, and shelter. A modern person could walk through the same place and see scenery while they saw instructions. The fire is fed again before the group begins to separate into the work of the day. It cannot be allowed to vanish, because remaking flame from nothing takes effort, time, and sometimes luck that no one wants to spend unnecessarily. The person who watches the embers may not look heroic, but without that attention, the evening could become colder, darker, and more dangerous. By now, stomachs are not full in the modern sense, but they are steady enough. The body has been given enough to move, think, carry, dig, track, teach, and endure whatever the day begins to reveal. In prehistory, that may have been enough, because perfection at one meal mattered less than balance across many days. Still, pleasure has not been absent. The sweetness of dried fruit, the warmth of roasted roots, the richness of fat, and the satisfaction of a shell cracking cleanly all carry small moments of reward. These were not decorative luxuries added to survival. They were part of why survival felt like life. And now the morning changes. The softness around the fire begins to loosen as people gather tools, lift baskets, check bindings, and turn their attention toward the land beyond camp. The day's real work is approaching, but the first surprise is already clear. The work that kept humanity alive was not always the one painted most dramatically on cave walls. The hunt will come later, with all its danger, strategy, and memory. But before the spear enters the story, another kind of skill must take the lead, quieter, and far more dependable. Because most days, the food that saved the group did not thunder across the ground. It waited hidden under leaves, inside shells, beneath soil, and in places only the trained eye knew how to read. The people who leave camp now are not chasing drama. They are carrying baskets, digging sticks, sharpened flakes, and the kind of memory that makes the land less mysterious to those who know how to listen to it. Their work will not become the heroic image most people imagine, yet without it, the fire tonight may have very little around it worth sharing. You walk with a small group, perhaps an older woman whose knowledge of plants is wider than anyone else's, a younger relative still learning, and a child carried close enough to feel your breathing. The ground ahead is not random space, but a remembered path stitched together from seasons, mistakes, and discoveries. Every step leads toward places that have fed the group before, but the question always remains, will they still feed you today? The first goal may be a stand of trees known to produce food at this time of year. You do not need a drawn map because the map lives inside memory, connected to turns in the land, the slope of light, and the feel of distance in the legs. What modern people might call wandering is actually navigation, guided by years of watching the same living world change and return. The walk is harder than it looks. You cover miles over uneven ground, carrying tools before you carry food, and later carrying food before you can rest. The body is used to it, but familiarity does not make weight disappear, and by the time the sun rises higher, every strap and basket begins to announce itself. Gathering is not passive collection. It is a disciplined act of attention where the smallest difference can decide whether a plant becomes dinner or danger. A leaf shape, a patch of disturbed soil, or a cluster growing in the wrong place can speak clearly to someone trained enough to understand it. The older woman stops at a piece of ground you would have passed without interest. She sees a sign almost hidden among the stems and presses her digging stick into the soil with slow certainty. What appears empty begins to open, and the day reveals its first secret beneath the surface. The root she lifts is ugly, pale, and heavy with promise. It does not look like treasure, but everyone with her understands what it means after fire has done its work later in the evening. A few more follow, and suddenly one small patch of earth has become a contribution to the whole group's survival. But no one takes everything. Enough is gathered, then some is left behind, not because anyone speaks of conservation as an idea, but because hunger has taught memory to think beyond today. If the place is stripped bare now, what will be waiting when the group returns after the next turn of season? The younger relative watches closely, and the lesson begins without the shape of a lesson. The older woman points to another plant that looks dangerously similar, then tells a story about someone who once made that mistake and paid for it with days of pain. The difference is small, almost insulting in its subtlety, and that is exactly why it must never be forgotten. This is how knowledge survives before writing. It hides inside stories, warnings, gestures, jokes, and the fear attached to someone else's suffering. A child may forget a dry instruction, but they remember the tale of the person who ate the wrong root and nearly did not wake again. The group moves farther, and the morning becomes a chain of recognitions. Here a plant is too old to bother with, there a patch may be ready in 2 days. And beyond it, something useful grows where water once stood. How much intelligence does it take to live this way, when every meal depends on reading a world that refuses to explain itself twice? The answer is carried in the silence between movements.
No one is guessing wildly, and no one is simply taking whatever appears.
Each choice is filtered through memory, season, risk, and the needs of people who are not standing there, but will depend on what returns to camp. At a fallen log, the older woman slows again. Mushrooms have appeared in the damp wood, and the group's mood changes slightly because mushrooms are food only when certainty is stronger than hunger. She studies them carefully, takes a few, and leaves the rest as if the wrong confidence would be more dangerous than an empty hand. The child being carried wakes and shifts against your back. Their world is movement, warmth, voices, and the rhythm of adults doing work they do not yet understand. But their eyes are already gathering pieces of the future, because one day they will know why everyone stopped, why some things were taken, and why others were left untouched. By midday, the baskets have gained weight. There are roots, seeds, tough leaves for later use, and perhaps bark from a tree known to help a fever when boiled long enough. None of it looks spectacular, yet each item carries a purpose, and each purpose connects the body to someone's remembered knowledge. The gathering party does not move through the land as owners. They move like people inside a relationship that can punish carelessness and reward attention. Take too much, return too late, ignore the signs, or forget where something grows and the land becomes less generous without ever needing to become hostile. There is a rhythm to the work that can feel almost peaceful from far away. Walk, notice, kneel, dig, cut, lift, taste cautiously, remember, and move again. But beneath that calm rhythm sits constant alertness, because the same place that offers food can also hide weather changes, strangers, injured animals, or predators resting out of sight. The younger relative asks about a bright fruit growing low in the brush. The older woman does not simply say yes or no. She draws the child closer to examine the stem, the skin, and the way it grows. The question becomes a doorway, and the answer becomes another story that will travel farther than the fruit itself. This is the hidden classroom of the Paleolithic world. No benches, no written names, no formal hour of instruction, yet the education never stops. Every plant encountered becomes part of a mental archive, and every mistake avoided becomes another day the group does not have to mourn. Modern people often treat knowledge as something stored outside the body. In this world, knowledge must live in the body itself, in the eye, the hand, the nose, the memory, and the caution that rises before desire. What would happen to a person from today if they were dropped into this landscape with an empty stomach and no one to teach them? The answer is uncomfortable, because intelligence alone would not save them. Without inherited knowledge, the land would be full of possible food that might as well be locked behind an invisible door. The gatherer's skill is the key, and that key took generations to shape. As the afternoon begins to lean forward, the group is far from camp. The wait is real now, and the return journey will be slower than the departure. Success in gathering is not announced by triumph, but by aching shoulders and baskets that make each step more difficult. Still, there is satisfaction in this kind of work. The group may not sing your name tonight, and no one may describe your return with the excitement reserved for a dramatic hunt. But when the food is laid near the fire, everyone will understand what has happened, because reliability is its own form of power. This is the part of prehistoric life that rarely survives in imagination. The steady work, the remembered patches, the careful digging, the child watching, the elder correcting, the repeated return to places that feed quietly. Humanity did not live by spectacle alone. It lived by patience. When the group finally turns back, the path feels different under the weight of what has been found. The child is restless, the baskets pull at shoulders, and the sun has begun its slow movement toward evening. Each step back is a promise carried toward the camp. Tonight, there will be something to cook, something to share, something to build the next story around, and yet, somewhere beyond this quiet success, another kind of work is unfolding or waiting to begin. It is less dependable, more dangerous, and far more likely to dominate the stories told after dark. Gathering may feed the group most days, but the hunt, when it happens, carries a different kind of tension entirely. The hunt begins long before anyone sees an animal. It begins with signs remembered from yesterday, with tracks noticed near water, with a quiet agreement among people who understand that a single mistake can turn the promise of meat into injury or nothing at all. There is excitement in it, but the excitement is controlled because hunger does not forgive foolish courage. A small group leaves the camp with weapons prepared and bodies already conserving strength. Their spears are not crude sticks, but carefully shaped tools carrying many hours of cutting, binding, smoothing, and repair. Each one holds the work of hands that understood wood, stone, sinew, and pressure long before anyone wrote the word engineering. They do not run into the landscape like warriors in a story. They move carefully, speaking little, allowing the ground to tell them whether the plan still makes sense. If gathering is the art of noticing what waits, hunting is the art of following what refuses to wait. A tracker kneels near a mark, pressed into soft earth. To an untrained eye, it is only a shallow shape, but to him it has direction, age, weight, and mood. The animal passed recently, not panicked, not weak, and not yet aware that human attention has begun to close around it. This is where the hunt becomes something far more complex than strength. The hunter must imagine the animal's path, its thirst, its fear, its habit, and the places it will choose if disturbed. What kind of mind can follow another creature so closely that a mark in soil becomes almost a sentence? The group continues for hours. There is no sudden charge, no endless shouting, no dramatic clash worthy of the image we inherited from films. Most of hunting is patience, and patience leaves fewer marks in imagination than blood. The sun rises higher, and the air grows harder to move through. Sweat begins to gather on skin, not as weakness, but as one of the strange gifts that made humans dangerous in a way claws could never be. You cannot outrun many animals over a short distance, but your body can keep moving after speed has betrayed them. At last, the animals are seen at a distance. The hunters pause, not because they are afraid to act, but because the wrong first move can waste the entire day. They study the spacing, the wind, the direction of escape, and the one animal that might be separated if pressure is applied correctly. There is a choice now. Move close and risk a throw, or begin the long pressure of endurance, forcing the animal to spend its strength while humans spend their patience. Which predator is more terrifying in the end, the one that strikes fast or the one that simply refuses to stop following? The hunters spread and the movement begins. The animal bolts with a power no human body can match, vanishing ahead as if the chase is already over. But the humans do not stop, because the race they are running is not the same race the animal thinks it has won. They follow at a steady pace, using tracks, broken signs, and brief glimpses to keep the pressure alive. The animal rests, then flees again, but each burst costs more than the last. The day becomes a slow negotiation between heat, fear, and endurance. Hours pass, and the landscape seems to narrow around one exhausted body. The animal's breathing grows heavy, its movements less certain, its decisions poorer. The hunters are tired too, but tired in a different way, still organized, still communicating, still held together by the invisible discipline of the group. No single person owns this moment. One watches the track, one keeps the line, one drops back and returns, and another waits for the instant when distance becomes possible. Hunting here is not individual heroism. It is cooperation sharpened into movement. Finally, the opening appears. A hunter steps close enough, the spear leaves the hand, and for one suspended second the entire day seems to wait in the space between flight and impact. When the weapon strikes, the tension does not vanish immediately because death, even when necessary, is never a small event. The animal falls and the hunters approach carefully. There may be a gesture, a spoken acknowledgement, or a silence that means more than celebration. We cannot know the exact words, but the care around the kill suggests that the animal is not treated as an object only. Then the work becomes practical. A cut is made, the hide is opened, and the body is separated into what must be eaten soon, what can be carried, and what can become useful in other ways. Nothing here is merely meat, because skin, bone, tendon, fat, and organ each have a future if handled correctly. The knowledge required is precise and unsentimental. One person knows where to open the body without wasting fluids, another knows which parts spoil fastest, and another prepares what can be moved back before scavengers arrive. How many generations had to learn from failure before this work became so efficient that almost nothing was lost? But success creates its own problem. The camp is far away, and the animal is too much for the first group to carry alone. Meat left unattended becomes an invitation to teeth, wings, and hunger from every direction. Someone must return quickly for help. The others remain near the kill, guarding it, cutting it, and perhaps starting smoke or fire to delay what will come if they fail to protect it. A hunt does not end when the animal falls. It ends only when the group has turned danger into stored value. When help arrives, the event changes shape. More hands mean more carrying, more cutting, more voices, and a growing sense that tonight will be different from other nights. A successful hunt is not just food returning to camp. It is a story already beginning to form before the first load reaches the fire. The people who come to help do not need a speech to understand the importance of what has happened. Children old enough to carry take smaller burdens, elders inspect useful pieces, and adults divide the weight according to strength and need. The body of one animal becomes a moving chain of human cooperation. On the return, fatigue mixes with anticipation. There will be food tonight, but also retelling, judgment, laughter, correction, and memory. The hunt will be described again and again, not only to honor the hunters, but to teach those who were not there how the signs appeared, how the animal turned, and where patience almost failed. This is why hunting matters beyond calories. It trains attention, strengthens alliances, tests courage, rewards coordination, and creates stories powerful enough to live in the group long after the meat is gone. Yet the danger of the story is that it can make hunting seem more constant than it truly was. Many hunts fail. Tracks disappear, animals sense danger too soon, weather changes, bodies tire, or the chance simply never comes. For every return with meat, there are attempts that end in silence, aching legs, and the hard humility of coming back with nothing. That is why the group cannot depend on glory. The steady food gathered from the land remains essential, because drama is not reliable enough to feed children every day. The hunt is extraordinary when it succeeds, but the ordinary work around it is what keeps the group alive between those rare moments. Still, when meat does come, the camp changes. The smell reaches people before the hunters fully arrive, and the fire becomes the place where success will be divided, cooked, discussed, and remembered. For one evening, the uncertainty of the day loosens its grip. The animal that ran in the heat is no longer only an animal. It is nourishment, clothing, tools, teaching, status, gratitude, and another thread in the story of the band. By nightfall, what happened out there will begin transforming into culture, because humans do not merely survive events, they turn them into meaning. And after the meat is carried, after the first excitement settles, another quieter sound will return to the center of camp. Stone will meet stone, hide will scrape under a practiced hand, and someone will begin making the tools that tomorrow's survival already depends on. The sound of toolmaking returns in small, deliberate beats. Stone meets stone, then pauses, then strikes again, as if the person working is listening for an answer hidden inside the material. Nothing about this is careless, because one wrong blow can ruin a piece that took time, distance, and knowledge to bring into camp. A woman sits near enough to the fire to see the edges clearly, holding a prepared piece of flint in one hand. She does not hit it as a child might hit a rock for noise. She studies its surface, turns it slightly, and chooses the place where force will open it. What looks simple from a distance is actually a conversation between eye, hand, memory, and stone. When the strike lands correctly, a thin blade slips away from the core. It flashes briefly in the light, sharp enough to cut hide, meat, fiber, or wood, with a pressure that would surprise anyone expecting crude prehistoric tools. The camp may seem poor by modern standards, but inside that small flake is a technology refined over countless generations. The real skill lies in seeing the tool before it exists. The maker must imagine how the stone will break, where the force will travel, and how much pressure is too much. How long does a person have to practice before a hidden edge inside a stone becomes visible to them before the first strike is made? There are failures around her feet. Broken fragments, wrong angles, pieces too thick or too short, all of them part of the invisible education that made the successful blade possible. Archaeologists thousands of generations later will find those scattered remains and read them like the abandoned thoughts of a vanished mind. The new blade is not finished when it separates from the core. A sharp edge alone is useful, but a handled tool gives the hand more control and protects the fingers from its own danger. So the maker reaches for wood, prepared earlier, and begins the next act of transformation. Resin softens near the heat, sticky and dark. It is mixed with strengthening material, pressed into a groove, and used to hold the blade where it must not shift. Then sinew is wrapped around the joint, tightening as it dries until stone and handle become one working object. This is chemistry without glass, engineering without diagrams, and design without measurement marks. No one needs to call it science for it to be precise. The proof is simple. If the binding fails tomorrow, someone may lose meat, blood, or life. Nearby, another person works with antler. The sound is different, quieter, and more patient. A scraping rather than a strike. Antler does not break like stone, and that difference makes it valuable for tools that need strength, flex, and a kind of forgiveness stone does not always have. He shapes the piece slowly, removing thin curls with a sharp implement. Every few minutes he stops, turns it, tests the balance, and imagines how it will behave when thrown or pressed into use. In a world where material is not purchased but earned, nothing precious is rushed. The antler point may take hours. It may serve in a weapon, a piercing tool, or something needed for work that has not yet arrived. Why spend so much time on one object, unless the people here understand that tomorrow's success can be decided by what the hands finish today? Across the camp, hide work continues with its own rhythm.
A skin is stretched and a scraper moves across it again and again, removing what would rot if left behind.
The movement looks repetitive, but the person doing it knows where to press harder and where a careless stroke would tear what must remain whole. This hide may become clothing, a blanket, a bag, or a covering strong enough to travel. Before that, it must be cleaned, softened, treated, worked, smoked, and watched. The animal has already died, but its usefulness depends on the living knowing how to carry it beyond the moment of death. Another person punches holes along an edge with a pointed bone tool. The spacing is not decorative yet, but it matters because uneven holes will pull badly when the sinew is threaded through. What begins as skin slowly becomes something shaped to a human body and a human need. A child sits close enough to see, but not close enough to interrupt too often. They touch scraps, imitate small gestures, and learn through the slow embarrassment of doing something badly before doing it better. No one separates childhood from apprenticeship here, because watching is already a form of work. A bone needle appears in practiced fingers. It is small, smooth, and astonishing when you understand what it allows. Fitted clothing, stronger seams, layered warmth, and ornaments sewn into place. With a hole at one end and sinew pulled through it, this tiny object changes the relationship between skin, weather, and survival. The person sewing does not need to explain each movement. Their hands already know the path, and the child's eyes follow that path with the intensity of someone storing the future. How many revolutions in human life began not with a shout, but with a quiet tool, small enough to lose in the dust? There is beauty in these objects even when beauty is not required. Some points are shaped more evenly than function demands, and some bone pieces carry marks too careful to be accidental. This is where survival begins to exceed itself, because humans rarely stop at making something useful when they can also make it recognizable. A tool can say who made it. A bracelet can say where a person has been, and a carved handle can carry the mark of a hand that wanted to be remembered. In a small group, reputation does not need coins or titles. It can live in the quality of a blade or the elegance of a stitch. An older man works on shells obtained from far away. He drills them slowly, turning each one into a bead that will later rest against skin or clothing. No one needs beads to cut meat or dig roots, and that is exactly why they matter. Adornment proves that life here is not only hunger, answering hunger. It says there is identity, connection, desire, pride, belonging, and memory moving through the group alongside practical need. When a shell from the coast reaches people far inland, it carries more than shape. It carries distance, exchange, and the existence of other human worlds. The camp is full of specialization, even if no one writes job titles beside the fire. One person is trusted with stone, another with hide, another with carving, another with the patient work of repairing what others depend on. The group survives not because everyone is identical, but because different abilities overlap like woven fibers. This difference creates respect. The best toolmaker may influence decisions without raising their voice, because everyone understands the cost of losing that skill. What is power in a world without palaces, if not the ability to make something others cannot easily replace? Yet no skill belongs only to one person forever. Children watch, adolescents attempt, adults correct, and elders remember better ways from earlier seasons. Knowledge moves through the camp as steadily as smoke, visible only when light catches it from the right angle. A boy tries to strike a small stone and fails. The blade he hoped for becomes a useless chunk, but the maker beside him does not laugh cruelly or send him away. Instead, she adjusts his hand, changes the angle, and lets him feel the difference between force and control. This is how technology advances in a world without laboratories. Not through sudden miracles, but through thousands of corrected mistakes, each one slightly improving what the next generation receives. A better binding, a cleaner edge, a warmer seam, a sharper point, and slowly the future is built by people who will never see its full shape. The afternoon carries on with these patient sounds. Scraping, tapping, tightening, cutting, and the small voices of children learning which tools are dangerous and which scraps they may touch. The camp seems still compared with the chase of the hunt, yet this stillness is where the conditions for every future hunt are prepared. By the time shadows begin to lengthen, objects that did not exist in the morning are ready for use. A blade has a handle, a hide has become softer, a point has taken shape, and a child has learned one more piece of the world's hidden grammar. Nothing spectacular has happened, and yet everything necessary has happened. This is the part of the day that reveals how misleading the word simple can be. A prehistoric camp may have few possessions, but each possession contains knowledge, labor, memory, and trust. The fewer things people own, the more intensely everything must matter. And once the tools are set aside, another truth begins to emerge from the slower hours. The day is not consumed entirely by work, even when work is everywhere. Between the making, repairing, carrying, and watching, there is a kind of open time that modern people often imagine they invented, but may have mostly forgotten how to inhabit. You might imagine that once the essential work is finished, exhaustion immediately takes over. Yet the rhythm of the camp suggests something more complicated, because survival does not consume every waking moment in the way many modern people expect. There are pauses here, spaces between necessities, and those spaces reveal something unexpected about the human story. A young man settles onto a smooth patch of ground with no urgent task in front of him. His hands are empty for the first time in hours, and rather than rushing toward another obligation, he simply watches. The fire shifts gently beside him, and the moment seems almost strangely familiar. Children take advantage of this freedom first. They chase one another through the edges of the camp, inventing rules that exist only for the next few minutes before changing again. No one hands them a formal lesson, yet every game quietly rehearses movements, judgments, and social skills that will matter later. Their laughter rises and falls across the afternoon air. Adults glance toward them from time to time, not because danger is absent, but because trust already exists. The camp functions partly because not every second must be controlled. Nearby, two women sit facing one another with small objects resting between them. The exchange appears casual, almost effortless, but both understand the value contained in what changes hands. How many relationships in this world are strengthened not through survival itself, but through the quieter acts that happen after survival has been secured? The objects are modest. A shell bead, a carefully shaped point, a piece of pigment, something carried from another group weeks earlier. Yet each item contains a story that stretches beyond the camp and reminds everyone that their world is larger than what they can currently see. Conversations drift through the air. Some concern practical matters, some revisit old events, and some seem to exist only because people enjoy speaking to one another. Long before writing, long before books, memory survives by passing through human voices. Stories begin this way. One person recalls a hunt, another corrects a detail, and soon the account becomes larger than any single memory. Facts blend with interpretation, interpretation blends with meaning, and meaning becomes something worth repeating. An older woman gestures as she speaks. Children edge closer without appearing to, drawn by a tale they may have heard many times before. If everyone already knows the ending, why do they still listen so carefully when the story begins again? Because the ending is not the only purpose. Stories teach where danger waits, where luck can fail, and what kind of person someone should try to become. Hidden inside entertainment is instruction, and hidden inside instruction is survival. The afternoon light softens. Shadows stretch farther across the ground, and the sharp urgency of midday begins to loosen its grip. Nothing dramatic announces the transition, yet everyone seems to recognize it instinctively. Some people continue small projects.
Others rest.
A few simply observe the changing sky with no visible goal beyond being present for it. Modern schedules often treat unstructured time as waste, but here it carries its own quiet value. This freedom surprises many people who imagine prehistoric life as an endless struggle. The image of constant desperation is powerful, yet the evidence suggests something more nuanced. Could it be that some of the people we call primitive experienced forms of leisure that many modern lives rarely allow? The answer is not simple, because hardship remains close. Food still depends on uncertainty, weather still changes without warning, and injury remains dangerous in ways difficult to imagine today. Yet precisely because risk exists, moments of safety become meaningful enough to notice. A child lies on their back looking upward. Nothing is being produced, improved, optimized, or measured. For a few minutes there is only observation, curiosity, and the slow movement of thought. Elsewhere, someone begins arranging colored pigment across a small surface. The action is deliberate but unhurried. At first glance it seems unnecessary, which may be the most important clue of all. Human beings rarely stop at survival. Once immediate needs are met, attention turns toward symbols, patterns, decoration, and meaning. The same mind that creates a hunting point eventually begins asking questions that no hunting point can answer. A piece of ochre leaves a red mark against stone. Another mark follows beside it. What compels a person to spend precious time creating an image that offers no obvious advantage when measured against hunger or shelter? The answer remains partly hidden even now. Archaeologists recover fragments, traces, and clues, yet the inner experience of the artist remains beyond direct reach. Across thousands of years, a silent conversation continues between the living and the dead. The camp grows quieter as the sun lowers. Activity does not disappear, but its character changes. The frantic possibilities of the morning have become the reflective possibilities of evening. People begin gathering closer together. Distances that felt natural during the day gradually shrink. Human beings are social creatures in every era, and darkness has always encouraged proximity. Someone starts speaking again.
Others listen.
The content matters, but so does the act itself, because shared attention creates something stronger than information alone. Communities are held together not only by food and tools, but by experiences witnessed together. The children grow calmer, their movements slow, their games lose momentum, and some begin leaning against parents or older siblings. Energy that once seemed endless gradually gives way to another rhythm waiting just beyond the edge of the day. The fire becomes more noticeable now. Earlier it competed with sunlight and activity. As the light fades, its presence grows stronger, drawing eyes toward it with a pull that humans have followed for countless generations. Flames move in ways that are never entirely predictable. They repeat patterns without repeating them exactly. Is it any surprise that people can watch a fire for long stretches of time and feel as though they are seeing something important without knowing precisely what it is? The answers remain just beyond reach. That feeling itself may be part of the attraction. Human attention has always been drawn toward mysteries that seem close enough to touch, but never close enough to fully possess. Night is approaching. The camp senses it before darkness fully arrives. Preparations begin quietly, and another chapter of the day starts to unfold beneath the deepening sky. The tasks ahead will not resemble those of the morning. They will reveal different concerns, different rituals, and different ways people understand their place in a world that becomes far stranger once the sun disappears. And as the first stars begin to emerge overhead, the boundary between survival and belief starts to grow harder and harder to see. The night does not create belief by itself, but it gives belief a place to breathe. When the light weakens and familiar shapes become uncertain, the world begins to feel less like a surface and more like a presence watching back. A sound beyond the camp, a dream remembered too clearly, or the sudden movement of shadow can become more than an event. It can become a message. Your ancestors do not separate the practical and the mysterious as sharply as modern people often do. A successful hunt may depend on skill, but it may also depend on respect, luck, timing, and forces no hand can hold. If an animal gives itself to the spear today and vanishes tomorrow, how could the mind not begin to wonder what hidden rules govern that gift? Somewhere near the edge of the firelight, someone rubs pigment between their fingers. The red powder stains the skin, and the mark it leaves seems too deliberate to be treated as accident. It may protect, decorate, identify, bless, or transform. And perhaps the power lies in the fact that it can do several things at once. A face changes when color crosses it. The person beneath remains the same, yet everyone sees them differently, and perhaps they feel differently inside their own skin. That is the quiet force of symbol. It changes nothing physical about the body, while changing the meaning of the body completely. Shells, teeth, carved bone, and small polished pieces rest against clothing or skin. They are light enough to carry, but heavy with stories about journeys, exchanges, fears, and achievements. A bead is never only a bead once a group agrees that it means belonging. In the deeper darkness beyond ordinary shelter, another form of meaning waits. People have entered caves where the daylight does not reach, carrying flame into spaces that were not needed for sleeping or cooking. Why would anyone risk darkness, tight passages, and the danger of losing the way? unless something inside those places mattered more than convenience. On stone walls, animals appear in the movement of torchlight. Their bodies follow curves in the rock, as if the cave itself has been holding them there, waiting for human hands to reveal them. The images are not random marks made to pass the time, because they are too careful, too hidden, and too costly in effort to be dismissed that easily. A painted animal may teach a hunter where to look and where to strike. It may preserve the memory of movement, posture, season, or danger in a form young people can see before they face it in life. But if teaching were the only purpose, why place the lesson so far from the open world? Perhaps the depth matters because it removes ordinary reality. Down there is no sky, no horizon, no familiar rhythm of day, only stone, breath, flame, and the pulse of voices returning from the walls. In such a place, an image does not merely represent an animal, it may feel as if the animal has arrived. A group enters together, and the cave changes them before the ceremony begins. Their steps slow, their voices lower, and every sound becomes larger than itself. The mind, deprived of ordinary light, begins to fill the darkness with attention. Some marks are not animals at all. Dots, lines, handprints, and repeated shapes appear beside the figures, carrying meanings that remain partly closed to us. They may count seasons, remember migrations, trace visions, or mark the presence of people who wanted their hands to remain after their bodies were gone.
A hand pressed against stone is one of the most haunting things the ancient world left behind. It says almost nothing, and yet it says enough to cross thousands of years. Someone stood there, breathed there, lifted their hand, and left the shape of being human.
The same mind that follows tracks also follows dreams. Some people dream vividly, hear patterns in sound, notice signs others miss, or speak in ways that calm fear and gather attention. In a small band, such people may become guides between ordinary experience and the hidden life the group believes surrounds it. Call them shamans, storytellers, singers, healers, or something for which no modern word fits exactly. Their role is not separate from survival because fear, sickness, grief, and uncertainty are survival problems too. What use is a sharp spear if the group falls apart under terror, loss, or the belief that the world has turned against them? A drumbeat begins, perhaps from hide, stretched over a frame, or wood struck in a steady rhythm. The sound is simple, but repetition changes it, pulling breath and attention into the same pattern. People who were separate a moment earlier begin to feel the same pulse moving through their bodies. The rhythm grows and voices enter. A song may name animals, ancestors, weather, or spirits, but the words are only part of what is happening. The deeper effect is shared movement, because bodies that move together begin to trust together. In the firelight, a ceremony does not need a temple to become powerful. The circle itself is the structure, the darkness is the wall, and the watching faces are enough to make the moment serious. For people living close to danger, shared belief is not decoration. It is a way of holding the group in one piece. Small carved figures may pass from hand to hand or remain hidden in personal pouches. Some show bodies shaped with exaggerated care, emphasizing fertility, nourishment, or the mystery of birth. No one can say with certainty what each figure meant, but the act of carving a human body into symbol proves that people were thinking beyond the immediate task in front of them. Birth and death are never abstract here. A child born safely changes the future of the group, while a person lost to sickness or injury leaves a space everyone feels. Is it any wonder that bodies, blood, fertility, and the return of life would become objects of imagination, fear, hope, and ritual? The dead are not always abandoned to chance. Some are placed carefully, covered, marked, or accompanied by objects that seem too personal to be accidental. A tool, a bead, pigment, or food beside a body suggests that death may have been treated as a passage rather than an ending. When someone dies, ordinary time is interrupted. The gathering route may wait, the hunt may become quieter, and the stories around the fire may turn toward the person who no longer answers. Grief becomes social, and through grief, the band remembers who it is. The sky above the camp offers another vast field for meaning. Stars return in patterns, the moon changes and returns, and certain lights appear at certain times of year, with a reliability no human command could create. For people who depend on timing, the heavens are not empty beauty. They are a moving calendar, written beyond reach. A child looks upward and hears an elder connect points of light to an animal, a path, or a story about those who came before. Whether the tale is practical, spiritual, or both may not matter, because in this world, knowledge rarely travels without imagination wrapped around it. The sky becomes memory made visible. Animals, too, are more than bodies to be chased or avoided. They move with intentions, habits, strengths, and secrets that humans must understand to live. To imagine them as spirits, teachers, rivals, or beings with their own unseen power is not childish fantasy. It is one way of respecting what your survival depends on. This is the world your ancestors inhabit as evening deepens. A world where a stone can carry a mark, a cave can hold a presence, a painted animal can teach and pray at the same time, and a song can steady fear in the chest. The raw facts remain: cold, hunger, risk, death, but meaning settles over them like firelight over stone. And this inner world does not vanish when the ceremony ends. Pigment remains on skin, a bead rests against the throat, a tune lingers in memory, and a child falls asleep believing the night is filled with more than darkness. Tomorrow the group will still need food, tools, and caution, but tonight they have touched something that makes survival feel connected to forces larger than the body. As the ritual quiets, ordinary camp life slowly returns. Someone adjusts a hide, someone lowers their voice, and someone watches the last movement of sparks as if they are carrying messages upward. The day is nearing its final turn now toward the evening meal, the guarded fire, and the long, vulnerable passage into sleep. As the last conversations fade, attention turns toward the simple work of settling for the night. A sleeping place is adjusted carefully, not for comfort alone, but for safety, because darkness changes the rules that govern the day. Every position within the camp carries meaning, and no place is chosen without thought. Children are gathered closer to familiar bodies. The youngest members of the group drift towards sleep, surrounded by warmth, breath, and the quiet sounds of people they trust. Long before written instruction exists, security is already being taught through presence. The fire becomes the center of a different kind of awareness now. Earlier, it offered light for work and gathering, but now its role shifts toward protection. The steady glow marks a boundary between what belongs to the group and what remains unknown beyond it. Most nights pass without disaster. Yet survival does not depend on preparing for the most common outcome. It depends on preparing for the worst one. What happens if something approaches while everyone sleeps? And who will notice first if the darkness begins to move? Not everyone closes their eyes at the same time. Some remain awake a little longer, feeding embers, listening, and allowing the camp to settle around them. The transition from waking life to sleep is gradual, like a tide pulling away from shore. The sounds of the night begin to separate themselves from one another. A distant call, the shifting of a body nearby, the crack of cooling wood, each becomes part of a landscape that cannot be seen clearly. The mind starts building pictures from sound alone. Sleep in this world is never completely surrendered. Even resting bodies remain connected to their surroundings through layers of awareness that modern life rarely requires. Deep inside the nervous system, Ancient mechanisms continue listening long after consciousness fades. Some researchers believe human sleep itself may have been shaped by these conditions. Long, uninterrupted sleep may not always have been possible when danger could arrive without warning. If that is true, how different were the nights of your ancestors from the nights you experience now? A sleeper stirs briefly and then settles again. Another opens their eyes for a moment, checks the glow of the fire, and drifts back into darkness without speaking. The camp breathes almost as a single organism. Dreams begin their quiet work. The hunt from earlier may return in altered form. Familiar faces may appear in impossible places, and memories may blend with fears or hopes. To people living in this world, dreams are not always dismissed as meaningless echoes of the mind. A dream that repeats may attract attention. A dream that seems to predict an event may become a story retold beside future fires. The boundary between experience and interpretation remains flexible, allowing dreams to enter the shared understanding of reality. Outside the camp, life continues moving. Small animals search for food, unseen creatures follow their own paths, and countless movements occur without human witness. The world never truly sleeps, even when people do. At times, a sound arrives that freezes attention instantly. Eyes open, breathing pauses, and every listener waits for another clue before deciding whether action is necessary. A few seconds can feel strangely long when certainty is absent. Usually nothing follows. The sound fades, tension loosens, and the body returns reluctantly to rest. Yet those brief moments reveal something important about life here, because uncertainty itself is one of the constant companions of survival. The stars continue their slow movement overhead. No one watches every moment of it, yet their passage quietly measures the hours until morning. Time exists even when nobody counts it. Somewhere in the darkness, an elder wakes and remains awake for a while. Perhaps they think about the journey ahead. Perhaps they remember people no longer present. Or perhaps they simply listen to the night without searching for meaning. Age often changes the relationship between silence and thought. The fire burns lower. Shadows draw closer around the edges of the camp, and familiar forms become harder to distinguish. The protected world created by light shrinks little by little as the night deepens. And still the group sleeps, not because the world has become safe, but because tomorrow requires strength that cannot be carried forward without rest. Survival demands vigilance, yet it also demands trust in the fact that the sun will return. Hours pass in this delicate balance between vulnerability and recovery. Bodies heal, memories settle, and energy slowly gathers for another day whose outcome remains unknown. The future is already approaching, even while the camp lies motionless. Then something subtle begins to change. The darkness remains, but it no longer feels as complete as it did before. Somewhere beyond the sleeping figures, beyond the fading embers and the silent watch of the stars, the first signs of another dawn are already beginning to emerge. The change begins so quietly that no one notices it at first. The darkness has not disappeared, yet its hold on the world feels slightly weaker than it did an hour ago. Somewhere beyond sleeping eyes, another cycle is already preparing to reveal itself. The first person to wake does not rise immediately. They remain still for a moment, listening to the familiar silence and measuring whether anything has changed during the night. Awareness returns slowly, arriving before movement. A faint difference in the sky becomes visible to those who know where to look. It is not light yet, not in the way most people would describe it, but rather the absence of complete darkness. The world seems to hesitate between two states. One by one, others begin emerging from sleep. Some wake naturally while others respond to subtle sounds that signal activity nearby. The camp starts returning to itself before a single word is spoken. The fire tells its own story of the passing hours. What had once been bright and protective now survives as a cluster of glowing embers waiting to be awakened again. Who first learned that preserving a fire through the night was easier than creating a new one each morning, and how much survival depended on that knowledge? A hand reaches toward the remaining warmth. Small pieces of fuel are added carefully, and a patient rhythm begins that has been repeated across countless generations. Soon the first flames return. Morning is not a moment here, it is a gradual unfolding in which shapes regain their edges and distances become easier to judge. The landscape reveals itself piece by piece rather than all at once. The children are usually among the last to fully wake. For a few moments they remain suspended between dream and reality, unaware that the day has already begun around them. Their world expands only as quickly as their eyes do. Someone stretches tired muscles that carried yesterday's burdens. Someone else checks an object prepared before sleep and finds reassurance in its condition. The smallest routines often carry the greatest importance because they prevent larger problems later. Yet before the day's work can truly begin, there is a brief period unlike any other. Hunger has not fully arrived, labor has not yet started, and the demands of survival remain temporarily distant. Could this narrow space between sleeping and striving be one of the rarest forms of peace available in such a life? The sky continues changing. Colors that were invisible moments earlier begin emerging from the horizon, and familiar landmarks slowly separate themselves from shadow. Certainty returns with visibility. Now attention turns once again toward the practical realities that govern existence. Water may need to be gathered, food may need to be found, and decisions made before conditions change. Every day begins with possibilities, but also with obligations. The group does not move randomly. Experience has already taught them which tasks matter first, and which mistakes carry consequences. Knowledge accumulated across many lifetimes quietly guides the choices of the present. What appears simple from a distance often hides remarkable complexity. A morning routine that takes only minutes may represent generations of observation, adaptation, and remembered lessons. The wisdom of the group exists not only in stories, but in actions repeated so often they no longer require explanation. The renewed fire crackles steadily now. Warmth spreads outward, conversation begins to return, and the camp gradually transforms from a collection of sleeping figures into a community preparing itself for another uncertain day. Energy gathers like a tide returning to shore. Soon movement will increase, paths will be followed, decisions will be tested, and the landscape will once again become a place of opportunities and risks. But before any of that happens, there remains one final moment in which the world feels balanced perfectly between what has ended and what has not yet begun. For an instant, yesterday is gone and today has not fully arrived. The people around the fire stand inside that narrow passage without realizing it. And within that brief passage lies one of the most revealing truths about the hunter-gatherer world, a truth that becomes clearer the closer we look at how they actually spent the hours ahead. As darkness settles completely, the camp begins to draw inward. Voices soften, movements slow, and attention gradually shifts away from the tasks of the day towards something quieter and far more uncertain. Every hour of effort has led to this moment, yet the night still carries questions that no one can fully answer. The fire remains the center of everything. Its light pushes back the dark just far enough to create a small island of certainty, while beyond that circle the unseen world waits patiently. How many generations sat before flames like these, watching the same shadows move and wondering what existed beyond their reach. Food has been shared, tools have been set aside, and the immediate demands of survival have eased for a few precious hours. Yet even now, awareness never disappears completely, because the world outside the glow of the fire has not stopped being dangerous. Sleep must come, but it arrives as an act of trust as much as an act of exhaustion. Some remain awake a little longer. They watch the embers settle, listen for sounds carried through the darkness, and maintain a quiet vigilance that protects everyone else. Their presence allows others to close their eyes, but it also reminds us how fragile comfort really was. Above them, the night sky stretches across the world with a clarity few modern people have ever experienced. Countless points of light appear fixed and eternal, yet their movements quietly mark the passage of seasons, migrations, and opportunities still waiting beyond the horizon. Could those distant lights have seemed less like decoration and more like part of the same living system that guided every decision below? The children drift into sleep first. Their breathing slows, their bodies relax, and for a short time they become completely disconnected from the constant calculations that define adult life. Around them, older members of the group settle into rest one by one, surrendering consciousness while depending entirely on the people beside them. This dependence is easy to overlook. Modern life often celebrates individual achievement, but here, survival has always been collective, woven into relationships that cannot simply be replaced. No one reaches the next sunrise alone, and everyone understands that truth, without needing it, explained. The fire gradually shrinks. Bright flames become glowing embers, and the camp that seemed so active only hours earlier grows almost motionless. What remains when the noise of the day disappears, when the hunt is over, the work is finished, and nothing is left except the simple fact of being alive? Perhaps that is the quiet lesson hidden inside this ordinary day. Not a lesson carved into stone or preserved in written records, but one carried through countless generations by repetition alone. The rhythm of waking, searching, sharing, adapting, and resting shaped human life for far longer than cities, kingdoms, or machines ever have. And as the last embers fade into darkness, the story does not truly end. Somewhere beyond the sleeping camp, the world is already preparing the next challenge, the next opportunity, and the next dawn waiting beyond the horizon. When morning finally returns, another day will begin exactly as this one did, with open eyes, uncertain outcomes, and a world that must be understood all over again.